Oh, I've been muted that whole time. Stupid mute button. So,
Wondered why it was so dang quiet.
welcome to the show, everyone. Internet,
Unmuted.
yeah, live and unmuted now. Um, what I was saying, which you couldn't hear, you could just read my lips about. We were going to have a lip reading show. No. Um, so I was going to say, if you're joining us from YouTube or Google Plus, jump over to foolishtechshow.com, join our live chat from there. You can talk with us about the show or anything, honestly. We'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, today we're going to do a kind of basic computer hardware overview. And I was thinking we can even call these series the Back to the Basics series. Sorry, our dog is apparently deciding to bark at everything now. But yeah, so I was thinking we could just go over some hardware basics and have our series of training things like this be a Back to the Basics series.
Oh, sorry about that.
Anyway, the dog decides to not bark here. Alright, so for going over these basic bits, we're going to use the D72 start system info page. And actually, let me see if I can make this bigger for everyone. Give me one sec here. Alright, I think this should make it bigger. Let's check and see. Yeah, we can read that a little bit better now. Alright, so we don't have to break out the magnifier. Alright, so this is the system info page when you start up D72. This is what you'll see. You can disable it so it doesn't populate all this to begin with, and then just hit rescan system to get more information about it. But you can see it takes a little bit of time to check Windows activation. So during that time you might get something like that, but basically that would be the reason why you might want to disable it. And just so you know, if you go into config here, you can set the go directly to tab for none, and that'll skip doing that Windows activation check until you manually hit rescan system info, or if you go to a different tab, come back to this tab.
Hey, Brantley.
Yeah.
The show's not on the website. It's showing a laptop buying decisions, and I don't think it's live.
Showing is live here. Let's see.
Is the show called Laptop Buying Decisions, and it did air yesterday?
That was yesterday's show.
Maybe I didn't get the link on there.
Stream November 10th.
Hold on.
Hello everyone, this is
Checking. I think I just didn't set up the embedded link.
hello
No one wants to. Here we go. There.
Who's breathing?
I don't know. It's a little small delay, so.
Oh, okay.
You know what to do. I need to shut.
Alright, now it's live and on the site correctly.
Oh. Shit, better close that.
There we go. So now we're all set up, I think.
Yay!
Yay. Alright, so whenever the system info tab, configuration options, something else I'd like to point out on this, because you see that it says Windows 8 Professional and Windows 8.1 Update needs to be installed, even though this is actually a Windows 10 system. But we did put out on the blog why that happens, and what's going on there is because Windows decided to stop using the version number to manage what version they're on. So the version number for the current version in the registry shows the same as Windows 8, so that's why D7.2 shows it as that, but everything still works as far as working with Windows 10. It's just this cosmetic detail of showing it needs to install Windows 8.1 and showing up as Windows 8 Professional. So that has already been fixed in D7X, but D7.2 is on a feature freeze until D7X comes out, so that won't be updated there. You'll have to go to D7X to get that feature working correctly, but otherwise it really is not that big an issue, because all it is showing you the Windows version, which, I mean, if you look at the start menu, you can tell if it's Windows 10 or Windows 8. So we did put a blog post out on that, so if you wanted to check our blog, you can read more details about the version numbers and why that's working like that and what's going on. So otherwise, let's jump into the hardware bit here. And I would like to start off probably with the processor. And where you're seeing the processor is up here at the CPU. And basically what the processor is I've always referred to it as kind of like the brain of the computer. So it's what takes the various inputs and connected things and processes that information, basically. It's also called the CPU, or Central Processing Unit. And it is good to note that there are actually a couple different processors normally in your computer. Another big one would probably be the graphics card has its own processor on it. So the CPU is the more correct term to say, but usually if you just say I need to replace the processor in my computer, usually you're talking about the central processing unit. So what that does, though, is depending on how fast and how many various cores your processor has, which each core is kind of like its own little processor, it controls how fast your computer can do various tasks like number crunching or actually starting things up or running things and different things of that nature. You can see just sitting here running Hangouts and the several other windows that I have open, I'm using between about 5 to 15% processor power at any given time. So that's means that I'm only using about 15% of the total maximum of my processor power that I have. So have plenty of processing power there. You can also look in the Windows Task Manager for this. So here you can see I have actually 8 different cores. So there's 8 processors basically in here, and they can do things at various different times, or it kind of shares the workload across all of them. And Windows handles most of this power and process and how things are done. Another interesting thing about processors is you can actually overclock them. So some of your newer processors have what's called a speed boost, and basically what that means is you buy a processor at a certain speed. So this one's supposed to be at 3.5 gigahertz, and it has a speed boost that means it can go up to a maximum speed. It kind of basically like overclocks itself, and you can see mine is a fairly high speed boost, but that's actually because I have mine overclocked a little bit manually. So right now I have technically a 3.5 gigahertz processor. It has a speed boost of up to 4.2 gigahertz, but you can see it's actually currently running at 5 gigahertz. So I purchased a 3.5 gigahertz processor, but it's actually a 5 gigahertz processor. The speed boost that Intel does is kind of built in, and it's designed so that it's not going to overheat or cause any problems or do anything. If you take it further than that and do manual overclocking through your motherboard normally, that's when you can get into some risk of overheating your processor, which could also destroy your motherboard. So it's not normally recommended unless you know what you're doing and you keep an eye on your cooling system and make sure that your processor's not overheating. Because if it is overheating, that's something else that can cause issues. You'll get kind of random weird issues a lot too, especially if it's a overheating processor, which even without overclocking can happen if you have too much dust in your CPU cooler and fan.
Or the fan just starts dying.
Yeah,
Hey, you
fan
know,
does.
I just want to throw in here that back in the day, overclocking used to be worth it. And I mean, when it was really worth it is when you had the 300 Celeron A, the first one with some cache on it, and you could overclock that sucker to 450. Okay, that was a boost. Okay, now you can overclock safely a few gigahertz at most. I mean, compared to, I mean, a few meg, you know what I'm saying. It's not worth overclocking today for what you can do, I don't think. Just to put the extra stress on the chip, because I don't know if you mentioned, but the overclocking also causes additional heat, which I know you were just talking about the
Yeah.
overheating, but that also reduces the life expectancy of that process. Supposedly,
Yeah.
you don't want
But
that thing to run hot all day, every day. You know.
yeah. Well, and I mean, mine though, you can see I'm getting a good 1.5 gigahertz out of mine,
Okay, let me see.
because
What do you have?
I got a 3.5 gigahertz processor and it's currently clocked at 5 gigahertz.
Oh, I stand correct. Is that the actual clock speed?
Correct. The and
That's not
what
the
I was
that's not the turbo thing.
Yeah, no, the turbo thing is this one.
So you have it manually overclocked to 5 gigahertz?
Yeah, with my motherboard actually has a overclocking feature, so it can safely
Ah.
overclock things,
Mm-hmm.
and the
See, I've
speed
got that
boost would
too.
only
I
get me
just
up to
didn't
this.
bother, and in fact, I have the exact same processor. I
Yeah.
think.
Now yours is one step above, because this is the highest you can get in I think it's a 775 socket.
I don't know what I got.
Yours is the newer socket,
Hmm.
if I recall correctly. I'm not positive on that. But yeah,
I
so
don't know. Let me see.
the speed boost is the Intel built-in overclocking, which is done automatically and safely,
Um,
and that would get me from 3.5 to 4.2.
I
But
don't know the specifics apparently, but Device Manager says I have an i7-4770K at 3.5 gigahertz.
yeah, so you got a newer uh, newer version than I have.
Oh,
But that's another good point to point out there is that you do have to have this K version on Intel chips to actually be able to manually overclock like this, because that means it's unlocked. Otherwise, if you get one that's just without the K, that means that it's a locked chip and you're basically locked into what the speed boost can do. So, and that's another side of it too, is the processor connects to the motherboard and it uses a socket type. So there's at least 20 to 30 different socket types out there now, isn't there? Not
oh gosh, man, I don't even keep up with that anymore now. I quit. Like I used to keep up with everything, and now it's not even worth it. I just read the box.
I think at any given time, there's at least 5 different sockets that you can get that are in production and available for purchase. But over the lifetime of sockets, there's been at least 20 to 30 different ones. So that's something to keep in
At
mind.
least 30.
Yeah, if you're trying to build a computer from scratch, you have to make sure that your motherboard has a socket that supports the processor you want to get, and vice versa. If you wanted to get a processor or you had a processor, you needed to make sure your motherboard has a socket to fit that. And it does matter if you're going for AMD versus Intel. You'd have to get either a Intel board or a AMD style board. So,
in other words, read the box.
Yeah.
Read the requirements.
Read the requirements on each of the pieces of hardware you want to get. So
these days.
Now, another thing that's interesting to point out here is that it shows Windows thinks that I have 8 cores. What I actually have, as you can see here, is 4 cores. The reason it shows that I have 8 cores is what's called hyperthreading, which is basically Intel's way of making a single core look like 2 cores. So it's kind of like made it so that Windows utilizes the processors as 8 different cores, but it actually is only running off 4. Yeah. I don't really know the technicalities behind all of that. I think Michael is a little bit more aware.
I used to keep up with that too. Proctor probably could have explained it at one point in time too, but I doubt he can do it right now.
Explain what, Brantley?
Hyperthreading.
What is hyperthreading and how does it work?
How it specifically works in relationship to the actual processor threads. I mean, and the OS. I mean, like how does the OS, how does the OS take advantage of a processor that pretends to be 2 processors? I guess is the question. But then the question in itself is kind of confusing. So
yeah.
I mean, it basically mimics another core, but it's not as efficient as another core.
Well, no, it's only like a 5 to 10% performance increase in some applications. Asterisks.
Yeah. But a majority of your applications also aren't dual core acceptable anyway, or
excuse me. Yeah.
Most of your applications aren't designed to take advantage of having multiple cores anyway, which is not bad because that just means that program's going to work as much as it can, and you're still going to be able to use your computer for other tasks. So you can have 4 single core designed applications running at one time, and that would take up all 4 of my core speeds, but I'd be able to have 4 of them going at one time. So
yay.
And back in the day, I remember I don't remember how I got it to do it, but that whole window trick where basically Windows is thinking too much and using 100% of the processing power. Basically, you have to wait for things to get done before you can do other things. And that trick where you can have like 1,000 windows redrawn, that's part of that issue is where it would do things like that.
I don't remember how to do that, but I know I can write a little program to do it. You want me to do it? Hey, a quick batch script or something even. Hey, though, I just wanted to point out in terms of performance
Hmm?
and processor speed and performance. The first computer store I ever worked at, Proctor knows the guy, the bum. He still hangs around, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Right, Keith.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I've tried to teach him morals over the years.
yeah, good luck with that. He's the shystiest shyster there ever was. But um, he said that his performance test was starting solitaire, and I was like, what? And that was his performance test. When customers would come in, they'd be like, well, how fast is this one? Blah blah blah, blah blah blah. How's this compare to whatever? He start solitaire for him
Oh, I remember
because
that.
that's what they were going to play, right? And how fast did it start up? I mean, was it like bam, or was it like, okay, I'm here? You know, if it was it bam, I'm done, I'm up, I'm visible, or uploading, and if you saw an hourglass for a while in solitaire, there was a problem. And that happened in his store too, because he sold the Cyrix chip.
So that loaded pretty fast, I guess. Let's see.
If you remember the Cyrix chip,
Yeah.
Proctor does.
I wonder how this performance test lays out. That was pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, I think anything these days could pass the solitaire test pretty easy.
But I think the actual concept was, what the hell are you using the computer for? That I mean, you want to know how it performs, right? Well, let's talk about real world performance instead of charts and graphs.
And I agree. I do several things on my computer all the time, and more often than not, if I look at the processor usage, I'm not going to be using more than 30 to 40% of my processor usage.
That's true.
But if I do like smaller intensive applications like converting videos and crunching SETI units or things like that, I can take up all of the processor usage, which is why I do things like run SETI. If I unsnooze it here, you'll see my processor usage go to full blast here.
I do that again. Excuse me.
Or it didn't. Maybe my SETI's not pulling up, but anyway, so that's the processor. They also have some L caches. I'm not really sure about those. And
those are your level 2 and 3. They're on the processor itself. That's just a cache on the processor, not the cache. Used to be a cache on motherboard. Now it's just
all of it's on the processor now.
Yeah.
So the processor holds stuff that it's supposed to be doing in those caches, right?
Yeah.
Like its instruction sets.
It's like I don't know, but yeah, it caches things.
So, the other thing,
L1 is really fast, L2 is fast, L3 is slower.
Yeah, and all three of them are faster than system RAM. Yeah, and that's the point of that.
Okay, so the other bit that's included in there is virtualization that I want to talk about. Your newer processors have a virtualized mode, and I'm not completely positive on what that's for, but I know it has to do when you do virtual machines. It's kind of like a separate processor for your virtual machines. Is that what y'all understand it as well?
It's just a special instruction set that the processor supports that allows it to emulate itself sort of to the virtual thing a little bit better.
Now, I was under the understanding that it kind of separated it from your system, so like that virtual system isn't
No,
actually interfering
it's
with your.
no, it actually does not. It's just an instruction set. Do you remember MMX and SSE and all those things?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's
Oh,
just
so
another one of
just
those.
more
Yeah.
capabilities that your
hmm
processor can do, basically.
Yeah, and of course it's specifically for virtual software, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the processor, and that I think leads into the motherboard is probably the route we want to take on it. So the processor plugs into your motherboard, and I've always explained the motherboard as kind of like your uh, central nervous system. It connects all of your pieces and parts together.
That's
So
way more technical. Jade asked me about that actually on the way up, and I said it's the spine.
yeah, well, like the spine has your central
It's
nervous
part of, yeah, I
system.
know.
So, but yeah, that's kind of what
That's
I
way more better for Jade because she was a medical lab tech. So I mean,
uh,
she understands that a little more than that spine.
that's kind of what I've always seen it as, because your central nervous system connects like your hands, your feet, and your knees and your other body parts to your brain. And same thing kind of for the visual input and things like that. So that's what I've always referred to it as, and essentially that's mainly what it's for. It takes all of your pieces and parts and combines them all together. So your power supply, your graphics cards, your additional cards, your RAM, your processor, your hard drives, your CD drives, all of that all plugs into the motherboard, and the motherboard is what handles allowing everything to talk back and forth to each other. Um, then we can see my motherboard here is a MSI Z77 M Power, and this is a pretty nice motherboard. I've liked it so far. It is a few sockets old, so it's harder to buy processors that fit this one anymore. Um, I think actually this is the max.
It's still readily available. It's a socket 1155.
Well, I know that this was the max processor I could buy, and I noticed that this processor has like doubled in price almost, if not tripled. So usually that means that when they surge in price like that, they've stopped making and manufacturing that socket, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah, it's been a good motherboard, and I mean your motherboards give you different features. It makes it what you can plug into it, as far as what kind of cards and what kind of drives and what kind of power you need for all of those. And it definitely makes a big difference on what kind of processor you can have and what kind of RAM you can put in there. Do y'all have anything else you want to note on the motherboard? Like I kind of see it as it's like a necessity, but it's not really something of focus in my mind. Yeah, no, yeah,
I don't
Agree.
think so.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just a board that I always, it's just a board that everything connects to, and everything has to be somewhat compatible with it and it with everything. So,
yeah.
I mean,
So
there's not much else to say really.
it is definitely a very very important piece in it, but it's not something of like major focus or anything, other than the BIOS version is something that we could probably note on. I don't. I mean, and Proctor, maybe you can give me a better output on, because you work with more computers on a regular basis than I have in a little bit. But BIOS updates, are they really that continually common nowadays? Where
No, I would not recommend you update the BIOS unless you have a specific problem that a BIOS update would correct.
I used to take that approach, because like everybody used to be update crazy for everything, and I used to take that approach, if it ain't broke approach. But unless there was a performance consideration that something specific was out that improved. But now I don't know. And Proctor, you know better than I do. But I was under the impression now that especially with Windows 10 and all these other little BIOS things and quirks and supporting thingies, that it was probably just best to actually stay on top of that junk these days.
They do release some feature updates, especially updates to accommodate newer hardware.
Trusted platform module and all that junk, and
I know
it's starting to be used.
I know in desktops I don't really focus on it that much, but in laptops I normally do verify and check and make sure I have the latest BIOS, because laptops you'll see a lot more of your power efficiency and things like that come through in updates. So
Good
normally
point.
that's why on laptops I will regularly, every once a year at least, check and make sure if I have the latest BIOS for a laptop. But desktops, it's not that big an issue unless, like Nick said, you have an issue that you find out that a BIOS update fixed.
Or a specific performance issue, yeah.
But if you get to that point where you've run into an issue, it is normally difficult to narrow it down to being the motherboard needs a BIOS update. So, because you're
why not do it though?
Yeah,
it's pretty difficult to determine that is your solution.
Yeah, because
unless it's a power management.
Yeah,
I was about to say unless it's a power management issue, Windows isn't shutting down, it's not restarting right sometimes. Do that BIOS flash. Advanced power management is part of the BIOS. That BIOS is the we've been talking all this in Brantley. I don't think this has been explained. The BIOS is the software that lives on the motherboard only. It's called firmware because it's usually not replaceable, as in not reprogrammable. But it is these days, and it's or it always has been to an extent. There's a certain amount of memory that you can quote unquote flash, which overwrites that program with a newer program that makes it perform better. So that's the BIOS, and it tells the OS, and it talks between that and the hardware.
It's basically the software that allows all the pieces and parts to talk to each other.
Yes. So the I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I mean, what you said was well-rounded and good. I'm not sure where.
Yeah, I know. That was just a prelude to something else, but well. It was dumb if it was about the BIOS anyway. It's not important, I guess.
Well, the big thing I'd probably want to point out too about BIOS is if you mess up that process of flashing the BIOS, you pretty much replace your motherboard. So that's why we're kind of wary about it. Is because it is like if it doesn't go through correctly, you might be replacing that whole board. And if you do that in a laptop, you might
not as unreliable as it used to be, though.
Yeah.
It used to be more like a 50-50 chance it would work. Now it's mostly it'll work.
I just updated the BIOS on something recently, and the steps with it were so funny. It was like download file, run software, restart system, and wait anxiously or something.
I remember that.
Oh my goodness.
That is some weird directions to tell me. I'm glad I didn't read this before I started.
Oh gosh.
Go through, right. What?
I have something I have to interrupt now.
Yeah, go.
I got something to show Proctor and everyone out there. You know how I said I was going through some old files?
Oh God. What am I doing in this picture?
Oh, I know that. I know that modem myself.
Actually, it's not Proctor. It's Brantley that will know that modem. Yeah, you know that model number.
Yeah.
I have this. I think I have this. I didn't even look through it. I think I had it because it has the jumper pin configuration for the front panel. May be mistaken actually.
Yeah, I know
Might
that
just be.
modem too.
Oh, AOP. Yeah, you do. AOPEN FM56-PM.
Yeah.
I know we all do because when I started at the store where I worked with Brantley, I was like, hey, I know this modem. Proctor uses this.
Yeah. I think that was like the de facto standard cheap modem when modems got to the point that they couldn't get any
Yeah.
better.
Yep. I don't know. This is not the one with the jumper pin. Why did I have this?
Because you needed to know how to install it correctly.
I guess I needed to know how to install it.
For anyone out
I
there,
had one with the jumper pin configurations, and I had another one with the AT commands, all the USR AT commands.
yeah, for any
Manually.
millennial,
I'm
for
sorry.
any millennials out there, what this is that we were looking at is uh, a phone line modem. Used to get on the internet, you had to hook up your phone line and then dial into a different computer, and that gave you internet. That was uh, like a small percentage fraction of the speed that you are probably used to nowadays if you've only had.
Not even. And it looked
broadband
something like
internet.
this. It looked a little something like that.
And that meant that you could plug up your phone to it so you could even listen to your computer talking over the internet. That was always
right?
fun for everyone.
I used to love to hear the sound when you dialed up.
Yeah.
I missed that so many years.
I set that as my ringtone for a little
I
while.
was about to say, I bet that's a ringtone.
Yeah, it's a good ringtone.
All right, so let's stop memory lane here. I'm sorry for interrupting. Let's get back to teaching.
So our next bit there, that's really a major player and role in using your computer, and what you really need is one of your, I guess, 4 or 5 basic things, is your RAM. And you can see I have about 74% of my RAM used right now, and that's because I'm running several virtual machines that basically virtualize a entire RAM for a system. But nowadays, especially with Windows 10, you could probably get away with having just 4 gigs of RAM. You wouldn't need 24 gigs of RAM like I have here, or 32 gigs of RAM, unless you're doing things like running multiple virtual systems. I think that and maybe Photoshop and some of your CAD programs are probably the only places where you would need like an extensive amount of RAM.
That and Google Chrome.
And Chrome, yeah. So, but I mean, normally with 4 gigs of RAM, you're able to run Windows and a ton of Chrome.
Yeah, you can. That's only because Chrome limits itself if it really has to. But I mean, when you got 32 gigs of RAM and Chrome uses half of that, there's an issue, huh?
Yeah.
Well, a quarter of that at least, but still, it was more than a quarter. But
and essentially, what RAM is kind of like your short-term memory. So it holds the things that your computer is doing and keeps track of them all, basically, and makes it quickly accessible. At least that's how I've always thought of it. It's like short-term memory, you can think about 7 things at one time.
Talk about its volatility also.
With RAM.
Michael!
Hey, Michael.
Oh, hey guys.
RAM is also random access memory, which it's only temporary storage. So when you turn your computer off and it loses power, after a very brief period of time, it essentially erases itself and you can't get any of that data that was on there. But it's used pretty much the entire time that you have your computer on.
And can't hear you any longer, but I guess you're barking.
Yeah, I was yelling at my dog barking.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I've always looked at it as short-term memory.
Yeah.
Wouldn't the dog
Yeah,
yell
It's
back though?
it's generally the I guess the next fastest storage location other than actual CPU registers
No.
and cache.
Well, I mean,
I
well,
mean,
it's, I mean, well, that, yes, of course, but I mean, it's the cache would be the next thing,
yeah, yeah.
the processor cache. But why are why are you? That's bloviating. You don't need to say these things.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
we're on simple and
I'll just
basic
yeah, I'll just listen.
basic
Then.
hardware
Sorry
stuff.
about it. Sorry about it. Go ahead.
So that's about all I would really get into in RAM, unless you guys have any more you want to add on about what RAM usage is for.
I will.
Go for it.
Can I just simplify this for everyone? And this will be even good for the techs out there because you can tell this to your customers. I'm serious. I think this used to work very well. I figured out one day that well, I figured out. No, I take credit for this. No, RAM is, well, I did though. But for me, and the way I've explained it to people is RAM does not make your computer faster. And that's what people always ask me about upgrades and stuff, and let me upgrade my. It does not make your computer faster. It keeps your computer from running slower than it would otherwise. So if you don't have enough RAM, yes, your computer can run slow, but RAM is not what makes your computer run fast.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I equate it to short-term memory, is because really it's you can do more things at one time. You can't do any of those things faster, but you can do more of them at one time.
And right, and the thing is that the computer will slow down when you don't have enough of it, because you got too many things going on.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yep.
Now,
on that same topic, there is a virtual RAM, or virtual memory is what it's called, and that's when you fill up your RAM, it does fall back to using your hard drive as temporary storage space, but that is dramatically slower. So you don't want to rely on virtual memory. You actually want to not rely on virtual memory at all if you can. That's why you would want to upgrade your RAM.
The use of virtual memory, the high usage of virtual memory over prolonged times indicates that you need a RAM upgrade in your computer effectively. So, in my opinion,
it's not so bad today. Virtual memory, there's a certain amount of it that's used in modern versions of Windows, XP and up, really, that is just going to be there, and especially in Vista and up, it's just going to be there. So don't look and go, oh, I'm using some, I need more RAM. That's not true.
No, but I mean, I'm talking about. Soft file, yeah, it has to exist, and there will probably always be some sort of activity on it. But I can tell you that I'm actually monitoring the number of writes on my SSD, and it's kind of high right now as a result of all the paging that's occurring on my system. But it's not going to be. You're right. It's going to be the volume, and so if you're starting to see anything more than a few megabytes on, frankly, it typically does indicate that you're in a low RAM situation.
I would say a few hundred, or in modern systems
a few
little
hundred?
more, maybe a gig or more, probably.
Okay.
And actually, it's always been recommended, and even still is today, to have
2.5 times. Is it still recommended that?
It's 1.5.
1.5 times your RAM, system RAM?
To minimum 1.5 and maximum.
Yeah, but you know who recommends that, right?
Microsoft.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Show me the KB. But that may be one of the things that Microsoft has also been wrong about. Mark Russinovich, SysInternals, he did a big thing about it for a while. I would be surprised if Microsoft still contradicts what I thought he was saying. That let's just get off. This is advanced topic here.
Right now, mine has recommended is 4, and I currently have 6.8 allocated to it.
Well, I will say this. I've never, ever, ever, ever read any definitive thing about a page file size. Never.
Yeah.
Everyone has there's either everyone has a different opinion or everyone has one of several different opinions. It's not even everyone at Microsoft. Like Mark at some point in time differed from Microsoft's whatever, and I'll have to start Googling, but
So the last big thing in computers that you need is going to be a power supply. And generally what you want with your power supply is more than enough power than what's going to be consumed by all of your devices. The more hard drives you have, the more CD drives you have, the more the larger video cards you have, the more power you're going to need in your power supply. But usually that's probably the cheapest of all the things, except maybe the RAM might be a little bit cheaper sometimes. But usually that's the one that you want to spend a little bit more on. And normally I usually recommend going for something that's not bottom of the barrel cheap, because if that messes up, that can potentially destroy all the parts in your computer. So that
I don't never cheap out on a power supply, and in fact, and my one rule of thumb is the heavier it is, the better it is.
Yeah.
Generally.
That's a pretty good rule of thumb, I'd say.
It's just the simplest way to judge good quality.
Yeah.
Weight.
Yeah.
And these days, high-performance video cards are one of the things that will consume a lot of power, and why you would need a higher wattage power supply. And then you can get into some pretty expensive power supplies.
Yeah, definitely. I also don't skimp out on the power supply, because it's like for the overclocking, power is very important. You have to be able to make sure you have a consistent good power.
Yeah, oftentimes people who attempt to go down the overclocking path end up starting out with systems that have only power supplies basically just capable of powering what they currently have, and they tend to see a lot of reliability issues with that. They're not able to typically push that as far, and if you find yourself in a situation where you're lacking that type of headroom, it could very well be that. There's some sites that I like, particularly hardocp.com, and I'm going to post that in the chat. But basically, they do, on all their power supply reviews, they hook it up and they confirm. They can show you graph after graph of analysis and the data that they pull in their tests and their long-term tests too that they typically run. So if you need to know more about that or are interested in shopping around for a new power supply, I would point you there, and I'll have that for you very shortly. Okay. If you didn't already.
So there's a few other parts that are nice to have, not always completely a necessity for your computer. Those 4 parts that we've gone over are pretty much necessities for all computers. Your motherboard, your processor, your RAM, and your power supply. If you don't have any of those 4 components, you're not going to have a working computer. The add-on things are so that you can do more with it. I say you only need a motherboard because nowadays all the motherboards that you can get are ones that come with integrated graphics and integrated sound cards, which in fact I'm still using my integrated sound card. Destiny just vomited all over the room.
Stop vomit.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Ditto on the sound card, not on the vomit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use the built-in sound card because there's really not much that you need an external sound card for nowadays. Used to be like you can get a lot more performance and power out of like a Sound Blaster external sound card, but I really haven't found that to be the case because most all of your built-in ones now are digital and high audio capabilities. So.
Well, what it was that it used to just take the processing essentially off the processor, you know.
Yeah.
But they don't even the daughter things like the modems and stuff, they're all soft. Everything you add is soft anyway these days, so there's no benefit.
Yeah. The video cards, though, are worth getting an external one for normally.
Well, yeah, that.
Because your video cards, you're going to get a lot more performance and power and capabilities out of having an external one. And nowadays, even you'll get a lot more performance out of the newer video cards because they are almost computers in themselves. They've actually gotten to the point where you can just have a bunch of video cards hooked up together and make a supercomputer. That's actually what a lot of supercomputers are. It's just a bunch of video cards all connected and hooked up together. So, video cards are nice to have external versions, but past that, the only other parts you really need are going to be hard drives and optical drives. You used to have floppy drives, but those are really so far out of date now that you really wouldn't need those. So optical drives and hard drives are really the only other things that you would probably add to it. And then your keyboard and mouse. So your video card would hook to your monitor, and that would give you your visual parts. Then your keyboard and mouse would be your input parts so that you can interact with it. The touch screens on monitors now kind of replace the mouse side, but not really the keyboard side so much, so you can do on-screen typing nowadays. But past that, the hard drives are your other bit, and I think the hard drives are probably the most important over optical drives even, because even nowadays you can buy flash drives cheaper than you can buy CD media almost, and it's a lot more reliable. So hard drives, you do have two different types out there. The older type is what you call it an HDD, or a hard disk drive. That is a optical disc that's magnetically read, and basically what it does is you have a disc, an actual little disc. I don't have any that I can show you right offhand. I don't think they're in the other room. But you have
and mention the neodymium in the hard drives.
Yeah, you have a hard drive and then a little arm that has a magnet on it, and that magnet is what's reading and writing your space, and it magnetizes or demagnetizes something based on if something's stored there, 0 or 1 style. Your other kind is
not a hard drive at all.
Yeah, it's an SSD drive.
It's a solid state drive.
Solid state disk. Or is it drive?
Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's a D word. Yeah. Solid state D.
Yeah. And what that means is it's kind of like RAM, but it saves itself. So where we said RAM, when you turn and lose power, that information's gone. With the solid state disk, it's kind of like a large flash drive. Like everyone's pretty much familiar with flash drives, I think.
Which is like RAM.
Yeah, it's like a large flash drive that saves its states after it loses power. So,
saving.
You will see it's incredible the amount of performance that you'll see out of a system when you just upgrade from a old disk drive to a solid state drive. And honestly, if you have a laptop, even if you're going to cut your space in half or into a quarter, you're better off putting a solid state drive into your laptop than using a old optical drive, because every time you pick that laptop up, you move it anywhere, do anything with it, you're increasing the risk of that hard drive inside going bad. With the solid state drive, you don't have to worry about that. I mean, you can literally drop it and it's not going to hurt the hard drive. You might break the monitor and some other bits in the laptop, but the hard drive is not going to be damaged from that. So if you have a laptop or a mobile device, highly, highly recommend you upgrade it to a solid state drive if it's not already. The other benefit is that you see a dramatic power consumption decrease.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest reason most people want to do it. It's not even so much in their laptops. I mean, performance is huge, but the power savings are orders of magnitude. You're talking about well below a single watt versus when hard drives are active, they can draw multiple watts.
Yeah,
Just for the veterans out there, I just wanted to throw this book. We've gotten so far away. Just for the veterans out there who happen to watch this show a little bit later on, there are some of us out there who does know there are actually more than one kind of actual hard drive, but we're not going to go there for this show. So
yeah. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, and yeah, and some well,
Although
yeah.
now I'm
It was
curious.
Getting old. Some
to
of these
be
topics.
to be fair, it was before your look MFM and RLL before IDE.
Yeah, that's, I mean, so obscure at this point in time, but I do remember actually having one of the first.
Well, I just,
machines
but,
I
but,
built,
well,
have that.
I am sorry, but inevitably there will be a smartass, and I'm sorry to you, smartass, because it takes one to know one, if that's any consolation, but inevitably there will be somebody out there who will say, they don't know what they're talking about. So just
Well, yeah, I
that
know,
out
but
there.
I mean, you know, if we wanted to go into all the esoteric, we would probably need an 8-hour show, and we decided that that's not in the best interest of you guys out there.
Just for hard drives.
Yeah.
Just for hard drives, yeah, that's
But
true.
I mean, are those available right now? Can you get those?
No, that
Yeah,
technology is deprecated long ago.
So I wouldn't say there are other drives than a hard
Well,
disk.
there are other types. I mean, I think I have one actually still, like a RLL or something.
I did
Just because
about
it's an antique.
15 years ago. I had one, but I threw it away. I remember the size of the first. Interesting, just to talk about sizes, and I don't want to digress too much.
I know you would want to talk about sizes. So what's the next topic?
No, I was talking about a 1 gigabyte, the first 1 gigabyte hard drive that a buddy of mine, I was so jealous, he had purchased it, and the thing was freaking huge. It was a full height drive, so it was, I mean, it was a good, you know, more than it seemed like more than an inch at the time in thickness, which is obviously much more thick than traditional hard drives these days, and it was extremely loud. As I recall, that's the other part that we haven't mentioned. But then, I mean, it goes to follow, since there's no moving parts in an SSD, they're absolutely quiet. And I don't know if anybody has a DVR. Most of those have traditional hard drives in them, particularly for the cost of, you know, gigabyte. Cost per gigabyte, but they will create a little bit of noise when they're writing. And I'm sure everyone's heard this if they put their ear up to those devices, and that's because there's a mechanical drive recording the data in there. The beauty, too, you know, with a laptop and on a portable, sometimes the quiet can be an important part, depending upon your work environment.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, go ahead.
But I think that pretty much wraps up our
Yay!
general computer basics bits. That pretty much covers all of your stuff you would need in a computer, and kind of gives you a brief overview of what they're used for, what they're good for, and yeah, I think that was pretty good. Did anybody have any questions about those, or want to go into them more?
Yeah, questions would be good.
All right, I have a question.
If there are any.
Was that your question?
Oh, shall I ask it?
Shall I
Actually,
ask it? Shall I ask it?
Actually, I actually had no question. That was my little trick
Oh, okay.
today.
All right. Well, yeah, that's the basics of back to basics on computer hardware.
Back to basics.
We may delve into some more topics later in another episode, but that pretty much covers the general gist and overview. We might have a session on what kinds of problems and where you can see them and why you might think it's a piece or a part for those, because that's probably a good topic to go over, but for another day.
I want some software where we were talking about the things, man, about the show topics and stuff. I want some software topics up in here quick. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're doing this, basics thing, I mean, we could start with software. We could do software. We could do using. We could do fixing. All kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did the file system and the registry, and now we've done the hardware. So yeah, I think software would probably be the next place we'd want to go.
Yeah, man, and some Windows usage, and then noticing problems, and then fixing them, I guess. So, I don't know.
Hey guys, I'm gonna head on back to the house. So I can be there when they get through with my internet.
Yay! Your internet. Tank gets internet. Today at 3.
All right. I will talk to y'all later on. I guess.
Take care.
Later
Tom.
on,
Good luck
too.
with that.
All right.
Well.
All right. Well, otherwise, thanks everyone out there for watching.
It's been a good show.
Yep, we'll be back tomorrow at
Some other time.
4 p.m. So join us then, and I think tomorrow Proctor's gonna do his PC repair tracker. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Sweet. So we'll go
Yay,
over that
PC
topic
repair
tomorrow.
tracker! Hey, Proctor, you
Gonna
did
go
the
over
new
the. Yeah, I did get the new version.
Awesome, I want to check that out.
So we'll be going
Luke sent
over
us
that.
a. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. You didn't say. And I'll say for you and the audience, Luke sent us a beta version of the brand new PC repair tracker. So we have something that you don't have yet.
And we'll
Actually.
be going over that
Yeah,
tomorrow.
version 2.0, I believe.
Yeah, big version.
Sweet.
Yeah. Awesome. Ooh, gosh, we got to promote that on the YouTubes because people will watch that they wouldn't normally watch just because of that,
Okay.
Because it's a 2.0 that's not released yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, join us tomorrow for that, and we will see you then. Hope everybody's having a good middle of the week so far, and we'll see you tomorrow.
God bless.
Tomorrow's.